Okay, cool. All
So
right,
when
so
you're
I hit record in the cloud. Let me see if it's saying so. Come on. Oh, it's recording. Okay, good.
great,
Um, Now I lost you. What the hell?
I see
Oh,
you just
close.
fine.
Okay, now I see you. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you first, just for our editor's sake. So this is Brant Thoman. He was one of the three of us who started Grand Theft Audio, the podcast that led to it all. But I'm also going to be asking Brant about how he got to know Jake Belcher as a kid, and also how his perceptions of how he came aboard. I want to kick off with those because we're hoping to talk with Mike Nagami, the guy that he replaced. By the way, Nagami and I made peace
Hmm.
last week. He's just not sure if he wants to be interviewed yet. He probably will, but he said give him a couple days because he was kind of
Sure.
overwhelmed. Like it was a big step for him to talk to me. But anyway, we're hoping we have him. Otherwise, we'll just talk about him, why we replaced him. He said he's fine with that. But so, how did you meet Jake Belcher? And
Uh,
tell me about your friendship as kids or teenagers or whatever.
sure. Well, Jake and I have been friends for, let's see, 36 years now. We
How
met.
old are you now?
I'm 46. We were 10 years
Wow.
old when we were met. When we met, we were both enrolled at Paradise Canyon Elementary School in La Cañada. We had different homerooms, but that didn't mean we didn't congregate like during recess and lunch hour and after school and such. So that's where our friendship started. We really became like much closer, I would say, our junior high years.
Okay.
Um, and At that point, we were both going to school at La Cañada High School, which had the junior high attached to it because they just didn't have the space. They used to own a previous property that they no longer use. They had sold to NASA. It was called Foothill Intermediate School, and that was the middle school. They sold that property to the Jet Propulsion Lab because it was right next to that. So there was no middle school anymore, and so they put the middle schoolers at the high school because they had enough space at the time. So junior high, he and I just started hanging out more and more, and in high school we were, a couple of, I guess, rapscallions. We tended to hang out together throughout the day and spend a lot of time hanging out playing video games and lots and lots of games of the board game Risk because
Huh.
when you had large groups of people back then, at best you could do two players on an old Nintendo system. So it was tough to keep everybody involved. At least with a board game, you could get 5 or 6 guys around a table, and it would take an entire day to play a game of Risk with these guys.
Huh. Okay. Well, so then, did Jake ever show, or did either of you ever show an interest in or love of talk radio before the Radio Titans or Grand Theft Audio opportunity came up?
We had both expressed at some point, I would say in our 20s, that being able to do something like that, being able to do a radio show where we could get a chance to interview people we found interesting, was something that we'd like to do. But that was, I think, both individually we had talked about that, back then the ability to seek out the information on how to pursue these kind of careers was a little more difficult. We didn't have we had the internet, but it wasn't nearly as vast and easily accessible. And there wasn't, you didn't have, videos or instructions on how to move forward in that kind of industry without going into bookstores and finding individual books. But yeah, we talked about it in the past, and nothing ever really panned out because we just didn't know what steps we needed to take. We didn't have the guidance.
Okay. So then, what is your recollection of how you got invited? Because what happened in my recollection, and of course, there's always three sides to every story, yours, mine, and the truth, is the idea that basically we were doing me and Jake were doing practice radio shows with Mike Nagami, a coworker of ours, and we had serious creative differences over what we could talk about. We didn't care. We always have been pretty uncensored, but Mike did two things that were of great concern to me and also to Jake. He would make jokes about the mentally challenged that were so mean-spirited that we just knew there was no way that real radio could ever go for it. And then oddly, the bigger problem was he kept razzing me about one particular woman who's actually agreed to be interviewed also, and talk about being at the center of this ridiculous conflict. There was a woman named Heather Petrie at the time, now Heather Garcia, who I had a crush on, and she was 20 and I was 35, but we were very good friends, and we still are. And anyway, Mike, she worked with us at the paper, and Mike didn't like how she quit. She did it without notice or something. So he knew that I liked her and that it was an unrequited attraction. And so he thought, oh, it'll be funny to razz me about her. But he was personally insulting her. I could handle a razz, that's on the radio. But when you insult a private citizen by name, it makes it unusable and suable. And we finally took it to John Gwynn, me and Jake's boss and Mike's boss, who used to work at Billboard, the radio magazine. And I showed him that I had him listen to one of the demos, and he goes, yeah, this is unusable. I'm sorry, you got to figure out how to get rid of him. And so me and Jake stared the guy down 1 or 2 Saturdays in a row whenever he would talk about Heather in particular, and just not laugh. And finally, after a couple weeks, Mike just says, screw you guys. This isn't fun. Why should I waste my time, if you guys don't know what's funny? And so he quit. But then Jake brought you in, and I was like, oh, gee, this will be interesting. Who's this guy that's coming aboard? And you turned out to be just wondrously adept at this. I still think you have probably by far the best radio voice of all of us, and probably one of the best I've ever heard. And you were really smart and funny, of course. But in my estimation, you were kind of, Jake was the wild man. I was I was on the, okay, I'm letting this happen, but I was always kind of nervous in a funny way, I think, about how far we would take things. And then you were like the kind of the counterbalance between the two of us, always clashing in a funny way.
Yeah,
And
well,
so what are your thoughts?
Well, okay, so I didn't know too terribly much about what went down with the guy you went with Mike. I just know Jake had talked to me about how you and he had started up doing these recordings at what was the name of the place that we were at? Do you remember?
Oh yeah, totally. I'm hoping to go back to LA and film.
What was it called?
American Radio Network on
right. That's right. Thank you. I knew it was American Radio Network, and we were doing 30-minute little clip shows where we were talking about goofy news. I remember you guys had started off doing that, and after about a month, I asked Jake, "Hey, how did everything go?" And he says, "Man, we've been having some problems. I was wondering if you might be interested in maybe coming on board and just give it a try, see what you think, and this gives Carl a chance to see what you're like, and maybe it'll turn into something." So I remember going down to the American Radio Network across from that giant 99-cent store that was down there. It was an interesting experience, and I was like, this is kind of fun. I could see why the guys dig it. And at the time, it was a small investment each week on our part to be able to do it. I mean, it was just I think it was like $15 or $20 a piece to be able to get in there for a half an hour.
Yeah.
And it was like a half hour to 40 minutes, something like that is what we were allotted to have.
I think I remember it was $27 for 30 minutes, and we each put in $9 a week, and we would get this crappy audio tape of, but it was good practice. We still aced. We learned how to be funny and do sound effects and things like that. Yeah.
I like the fact that they had, promotional drops that could be put in there that were already approved for that kind of content. So being able to get into practice of the whole thing, of just learning how to, be able to break away from one segment to be able to do a 30 or 60-second commercial break and then come right back and start up with something new, because, we should have covered everything. So we went from there. I mean, that's what I recall and how everything got started. I even, what was the name of the name of the young lady that you said?
Oh, Heather Petrie.
I think I knew her. I think I met her.
Yeah.
Because you guys worked at the Weekly, and because I was around you guys, I think I met her on a couple of occasions. So I do recall that. I recall her. I just didn't know what the whole situation was, and Jake never really got too terribly into it because it wasn't anything that was important for us to really. We weren't going to comment about it on the show itself because they'd be doing the exact same thing that he had just done. So we
Yeah,
moved,
sure.
and then to talk about our chemistry, there was always kind of a left, right, and center to our show. Like you said, Jake was a little more of the wild man. He was definitely uh, had more, I would say, conservative views, but not in a negative connotation. But
Yeah, sure.
because when we started getting into the political side of it, because for the longest time we were really just trying to stick to, we would try to cover one serious subject, but it only occasionally would touch on politics, and the rest of the time it would be talking about the wacky news, because that was where the most fun stuff was happening. I mean, honestly, there wasn't a week that went by that we didn't have some story coming out of Florida. It was always Florida that we just could not make fun of, because that's the way that state is. It just breeds crazy, and we got a chance to make fun of that on a regular basis, which I loved. But when we got more into talking about politics, we definitely kind of, Jake skewed a little more right, you skewed a little more left, and I had always been more of a centrist to begin with, so I could listen to both sides of the argument, and I knew what my opinion of it was based off of what I had studied, I guess, and where I landed on particular views. So I knew that my, not exactly my job, but my role was going to be to kind of keep a balance between you guys, because of the way you had what your views for the world were. And I mean, that's one of the things I like, is that the three of us respected those views from the different directions, because we understood that not every side is going to be right about everything.
Yeah. What do you think of? What do you think? Because I know we had Vagina News as a segment,
Yeah.
and I always and I played along, but I was always a little nervous about
get along. We can't get away with that anymore.
I
That's
know
for
we
sure.
couldn't, right? Yeah.
Not now.
Yeah.
Back then, it was a segment on a radio show, and we even had women comics who would be in there for those segments, and they would make fun of it, because that's what we were trying to do, was be satirical and to poke fun. We weren't trying to be offensive, and I don't think we ever really try. I don't recall there being instances where we said things that either you might say something or Jake might say something where the other two would sit there and go, "Wow, that's mean, that's offensive." And if it did happen, we usually called each other out on it, if not on air, right after. And more often than not, we would throw out our apologies if they were necessary.
What did you think of the? I'm trying not to make any of this self-aggrandizing or
Sure.
whatever. Like, I just was wondering. Well, this isn't really about me. The question. I just was wondering. Like, I tended, at least early on, until Jake got in a groove too of finding stars, and I can't remember if you did as well. What did you think of our ability to pull in stars right off the bat, and how that grew?
Carl, I will give you a tremendous amount of credit. You brought in on your own, because fortunately of your connections through the weekly, but also just being absolutely. But you were an accredited newspaper reporter. You worked for a legitimate weekly magazine, and you had access to some really amazing people. And what I really loved was the fact that there are so many people we had before they really blew up, or people who had just kind of gotten going. And I mean, a couple of examples, like Matt Walsh did our show a couple of times, founder of the Upright Citizens Brigade, and he's been nominated for an Emmy for Best Supporting Actor for Veep. And he's brilliant at that. The reason I watched that show initially was because I knew he was going to be one of the co-stars, and then I fell in love with the entire series. But it takes, sometimes to get me interested in something, there has to be that personal touch to it. And that Matt was such a cool guest with us and remembered us away from the studio to say, "Hey, how you doing? It's good to see you guys again." Then Ali Wong and Helen Hong are two incredibly talented Asian American comedians and actresses, and to see how much and how successful they are right now with like Always Be My Maybe was a really fun romantic comedy with Ali Wong. I found it my girlfriend and I, Gwen, both enjoyed it tremendously. And then to see Helen Hong show up on a series that we watch on CBS called the Unicorn, she has a recurring role throughout the first two seasons, and it's been really fun to see her. She's also on one of my favorite NPR shows, Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. She gets to
Oh, really?
oh yeah, she's on there quite regularly as one of their guests to play the game. It's so, and that's just to name a couple. We got to interview Mark Maron before he really blew up, before he got to interview President Obama at his studio in his house. I mean, he had always said he'd love to have us come in and do his show. We just never got the opportunity to do so. But Mark was a great guest, and again, a lot of these were comedians that you knew from working out on the comedy circuits, but also through interviews because of work that they were currently doing.
Yeah. So, do you have a favorite guest, and was there a guest that sticks out? And if you need to think about these and we do another session, fine. But a guest that stood out as somebody who was kind of a dick. And it's okay to do that. We'll figure out.
I know. I would probably have to go back and look at like a list of our guests, because I fortunately for what we've done, I like to think that more good stood out than the bad. I mean, there were so rare a time where I sat there and was like, wow, that was a waste of time. Why did we even have this person come in? Not off the top of my head.
Okay.
And to be honest, like you said, we may have to cover this at a different time, because right off the top of my head, I can't think of like a favorite episode either. I have ones that stand out in my head. But not one that I would sit there and say that was my favorite episode. I'd have to probably go back and listen to some of our old stuff again to do that.
What do you think of doing live shows? I think, because I look back at what we pulled off, because I need to go through your wall too and see if you have stuff, but because I've been so keyed up and excited to do this, I spent a couple hours on Saturday morning going through all of Jake's wall, going all the way back to the start, and I found tons of great stuff, and I found and I was just like, oh my God. I mean, my jaw drops sometimes. I was thinking, that there was like 2010, I think, was when we really exploded quality wise. And it was the Times writing about us in 2011, and that was, right. What did you think of that experience? Did your family or friends give you a reaction to that, or the Pasadena Star News story?
I mean, I forwarded all that stuff to them, and everyone seemed very supportive of it. They were happy to see that we were being successful. But for the most part, like at that peak time, you're right. We had gotten written up in the Pasadena Star News, and then we also had gotten as one of the top the top 50 up and coming voices.
Yes, we were on the Frontier 50 top 50 podcast outlets in the country. And it was a list that included, I don't think it was just podcasts, because it included Rush Limbaugh, Mark Maron, Adam Carolla, and there were very few. There were like only 5 or 6 that were unknowns, and we don't even know how they picked us, but it was just amazing. We wound up on this list.
Well, I mean, we were the number 50 out of the 50 they threw us in there, and that was huge, because that really meant that there were other people out there who had taken a listen because of the fact that we were bringing in some quality names to get a chance to talk to and sit down with. I mean, you brought in one of my favorite recurring guests was Brian Scalaro. I think he is.
I'm interviewing him in a couple days. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm really glad to hear it, because he's a tremendously funny comedian. I've now that Stacked is playing on Netflix. I think it's on Netflix.
Is it?
I know that. Yeah, I watched a couple episodes. I don't remember if it was on Hulu or Netflix when I was watching it, but I wanted to see. I always he likes to post a lot of clips on his Facebook page, which is great. So I get to see a little bit, but to actually get to watch a couple of episodes was kind of fun. It was just like, hey, it's I'm surprised he doesn't get more work. He's such a funny guy, and he has such a great delivery on so many of his jokes that I'm really surprised I don't see more of him.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let me think what else I was going to say. Oh, well, about the Frontier 50, this is sort of going out of order, but it all comes straight and I'm editing eventually.
Sure.
Okay, so Jake has agreed. I didn't before I even asked, broached broached the idea. Hey, would you be willing to talk about how things fell apart in Hollywood? And he jumped forward, and when I said, hey, would you do a documentary, he goes, only if I could tell the truth. And I was like, what, you're gonna make fun of me again? And he goes, well, that, but he also said, no, I'll own up that he did improper things with the money, etc. We'll spare it for later. But what I was gonna say is that what blew my mind was, we got evicted, and I was, in shock, and I think we all kind of were, because there were reasons that mitigate what happened and why I'm willing to forgive him about it and everything that will allow Jake to decide how much he wants in this. He had some very pressing problems happening to his family at the time, and we just the money was there uh, for various reasons, so I get it now. But the thing is, what blew my mind was, that I got pissed. It all broke up, and then 2 weeks later, you text me. I think it was literally like 2 weeks later. You text me and you said, "Hey, Carl, get this. We're one of the 50 best talk radio outlets in the country," and and that was like mind blowing to me, that to find out that we got that honor, and the irony of how that happening so shortly after we had blown apart.
Yep.
And it was because of that. If it hadn't been for that, and you telling me that, I never would have known about it. And if we hadn't had that happen, I probably was going to just go screw it, and forget I ever did this. And it
Mm-hmm.
was that made me decide. I got together like a panel idea of like 7 good friends, like Adam Grotman and Christina Myers, who were involved in a lot of the Hollywood shows, and I thought I would restart with them. I said, "Hey, let's do it as a collective. It'll be, this way we can all do the work without killing anybody." And they were like, "Okay, well, think about it, but we think you should take 6 months off." And so they told me wait till the end of January, and so that's what I did. But I wanted to say, any thoughts about the way that we were discovered at that time? What were your thoughts when things blew up? Because I know you
Well,
were innocent in it, and you were kind of, but it must have been hard
right.
for you to find that
That,
we got evicted.
yeah, it was. It was surprising the way it went down, but as I wound up hearing about how it did go down, it
Yeah,
exactly surprised me. Um, I'm gonna flat out say you guys got taken. You guys got you had a guy who said, "Hey, I want to put you in. I can put you in this place. Here's what the
oh,
rent's
that's
gonna
true.
be." And you guys were like, "That's a great price. We're gonna be down in Hollywood." And I thought for what we were getting, that was a fair price to be asking for, especially in that building. There wasn't a whole heck of a lot of other things going on in there, but because of that, what we were paying did not seem exorbitant. And then when we found out what they really wanted for rent, and it was just like, it was what, like 75% more than what the guy had originally had. And
Yeah,
we went in there under good faith. He had all the paperwork.
yeah.
When I finally, at one point I did talk to, or Jake, maybe Jake did, and he told me about how it went down, but he talked to like the landlord of the place, the actual property management company. The guy used to work there. He had been in charge of renting this property out and would receive a commission. Well, he decided he was just going to say screw that, and was signing fake leases over to people inside that building and granting them access through different ways. And like the way we kept getting into the building, we weren't supposed to be in there for like the last 3 months that we were, and they didn't know we were still producing shows out of there. But we were up there because Jake had been able to set up the call in the security pad at the front where you dial in would ring through to his cell phone, so he'd be able to let himself in, and he would let everybody else in. So that's how we were able to keep going in that place. So there was a good period there where I don't think we were even paying rent to the other guy because the scam had been discovered. But we had never really finalized anything with the other company. And then when they found out that we were still in there, that's when the eviction occurred.
Yeah, and it was, and you know what's really absurd also is that they had my name was the only one on the lease because it was my grandma's money that enabled us to do this, inheritance. But what was crazy was that they had my name, they had my phone number, they had, or at least this guy had it, and I thought that they knew we existed after a couple of months. My recollection was, I'll tell the story elsewhere in the thing. I'll figure out a more efficient way of telling it. But the short of it was, my recollection was me and Jake were going around LA, checking out different places. As you said, there was an employee who had a card. Everything seemed legit, cut us a sweet deal. But he said, just pay me cash. And thank God, we were terrible at keeping records. I think the only receipt we ever had that was of importance was that one. And that's what saved our asses. When they first tried to kick us out, I checked in, we were told we would get 2.5 months for like $1,300. And I checked in with 2 weeks to spare before the next payment was supposed to be due. And the guy kept not answering his phone. So I finally called the company and they're like, there's no radio station there. And I'm like, yeah, we're here. Your guy told us. What? And they showed up in the building. They found us. And then they found that there was like 10 other businesses in there that they had no idea we're in there. So this guy was making real bank.
Oh yeah.
And so what finally
thousands of dollars a month in rent from people who didn't have legitimate leases.
Yeah. And so then we helped them bust the guy, and then they worked it out with us. We were then they said we could be there, but after they weren't keeping their word about conditions, it was terrible. We had a door with a crack in the window to the studio. We had no doorknobs, so sound would leak in. And so we were pissed. And what had happened was Jake told them, I'm not paying rent until you guys come down here and fix the door. And they never would respond. And so when he kept holding on to the money 2 or 3 months in a row, they never came down there. And they never called me. That was the most absurd thing. They had my number. They never called me. They never wrote me an email. They never did anything. All they were doing was they had given a couple of notices to the office. And for whatever reason, Jake had hidden them or thrown them away. But I mean, the bigger problem is their own stupidity and not ever reaching out to the guy whose name was on the lease. So when it all went down, to his credit, when I forced Jake to admit that it was that I didn't know that we weren't paying, because I thought we had started again. That was the problem. And he said yes. He admitted that he was not giving me the full information. So, but then the way he got himself out of bigger trouble with them was that he reminded them, when we caught that guy doing this stuff and alerted you, we were saving you like $13,000 a month in unknown business. And so they, wound up declaring it a wash. And I don't think Jake had to suffer any sort of lawsuit or credit problems or anything. And it was just pretty incredible. I mean, we just had such a company.
They had very little that they could stand on because we had also been taken for a ride by these guys. Both sides had been wronged by the one person. We had a document that we had been led to believe was completely legit. Now, I didn't know you guys had paid cash, and that would have set up a big red flag for me. I also had told you guys early on that if you're going to do this, you needed to incorporate for relatively inexpensively on LegalZoom, get yourself an LLC, and then put the lease under the LLC, not under anybody's name, so that the entity that is the LLC would have been. But at the time, I didn't have a financial stake in it. You and Jake did. You guys had invested money, and I was just along for the free, the free broadcasting. And I was totally stoked with that, and I was happy with that because I was getting to do something I enjoyed doing. It cost me nothing to do it. And if it turned into something big, then there was something on the back end that might come my way. But I really had no say in the operations of the business. I kind of wish I had. I wish I had had a little bit of money to invest in it myself, so that the three of us could have gone in and done this. Because I think we could have done things a little bit better. But we're saying that 10 years in the past now.
Yeah.
So
Okay, so then hang on, I'm gonna pause a second because I'm
Sure.
trying to think what else I want to say. Hang on. There we go. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, so I meant to say the live shows. Now there's tours like Pod Save America and all that, but I think at the time, the LA Times definitely thought we were cutting edge, or they wouldn't have done a story about us, and they were giving us. We were like the pick of the night, pick of the weekend for events, because we would stage these great comedy shows and have sometimes 3 or 4 major stars in a lineup, and so I think it was pretty incredible to take it to a live level. And any memories about that you want to comment?
Oh, sure. No, that was what was great is that it gave us the opportunity. It led to us being able to do some live comedy shows. And we did them very successfully at multiple locations. We started off over at the Meltdown Comedy Theater. Those were I think we did 3 shows there. They were the first 3 live shows that we did. And we had I specifically remember our first one. I was really happy with that one because we had a great turnout and we had some really good guests. The second one was okay. And then the third one happened in August. And August is a tough month because we kept doing this for a couple of years beyond. And we came to find that August was a very difficult month to get anybody to come out to see comedy. I think it was 3 Augusts in a row where the weekend that we were doing a live show, we just could not get anybody into the show. And it was because I think we all came to realize that August is a month where everyone's out traveling for the last bit of their vacation before school starts back up, and work gets back into the full swing of the fall season. And there weren't people in town, and that kind of hurt us. So we started off there and loved that venue, and then we got to move over to the West Side Comedy Theater down in Santa Monica. And I thought we had several very, very successful shows down there. And again, we were lucky enough to pull some strong names, and had a good time getting to know them and getting to see their acts before some of these names got even really big.
Yeah. So and we went through these phases where when we started. So I found Baltazar Fedelizo, the guy who funded our first 4 weeks getting on KBC radio before we started podcasting. And he was a colorful character. Do you remember any thoughts about him?
That was Biodiesel America, right?
Yeah.
Yep, I do. I mean, he definitely was an eccentric guy. And I had completely forgotten about the 4-week stint that we'd gotten actually on to AM radio. Because the way that ended was so disappointing as well, that we had gotten somebody to invest enough money for us to be able to pay for the time on a Saturday night, only to lose out to, was it the Guardian Angels out in New York? Didn't they start up a thing where they were going to do nationwide?
ABC was telling us how good we did, that our ratings, we took that hour Fridays at 1 a.m., which is really Saturday morning, as you mentioned. And they went from 13,000 to 31,000 listeners within a month because of us. And they were like, holy cow, and they were ready to move us from 1 a.m. to midnight, and where we would be, not quite in the official lineup, but we would be introduced by the last of the official lineup for the night before, because they did a lot of pay to play. That's what we were. And then we were getting ready to do it, and they said, if you guys keep this up, we'll really put you in the lineup. And then out of nowhere, they call us with the word that corporate ABC radio in New York had decided to put the Guardian Angels show on all across the country and not have any local shows that were, outsiders.
So unfortunately, we landed outside of that opportunity. It just didn't work out for us. And
so we heard about podcasting through LA Talk Radio, and we were there like a year. And we had some pretty amazing guests there, like Mark Maron, Shane Black, the writer of Lethal Weapon. One of my favorite memories.
And Iron Man 3.
Huh?
And Iron Man 3.
Oh, that's right. Well, Well, but one of my favorite memories was our third episode there. We had Brian had Welch, one of the members of
That's
Korn,
right.
and
Of
he had
Corn.
become a born again Christian, was on his own solo tour, but he was still tattooed, covered, had crazy hair, and he showed up. He showed up in his full on tour bus and pulled into the parking lot. They didn't know what hit him, and that was wild. I mean, we were
Yep.
total nobodies, and this guy shows up, and I think that's when we realized, oh my God, we can talk anybody into doing anything we want,
Yeah.
and it just never looked back. It was a lot. That was amazing. So,
I
but
mean, we also got to score that 30-minute exclusive interview with Cheech and Chong, where we got to
oh,
sit
that
down
was
and talk to them. This was just before they had started going back on tour together. They had produced a comedy DVD of their new stuff, but they were going to be taking it on tour for the first time, and it was just like getting a chance to meet both of them and talk to them about what had gone on up until that point was a lot of fun. I mean, it was just very cool that we got a chance, because nobody else was given that much time. We were given the opportunity to sit down for 30 minutes and really have a great little conversation with them both.
Well, I think we shared more than a conversation with them, but
Sure. For a half
but
an hour.
I have a hilarious photo where because I didn't smoke pot as often as you guys, but there's just a hilarious photo, and I just look completely out of my mind grinning behind them. And but what was funny was the sound quality on that one was for shit, because we were doing it on the fly, and we were all kind of stoned by the end of it. And the funniest thing, looking back, you may not have remembered this. Do you remember where we were? It was incredible when you think about it now. We were at the Weinstein Company's LA headquarters. So imagine we got ushered into a little room, locked in with Cheech and Chong for half an hour at the notorious Weinstein Company. And, somehow the subject of, hey, want to share something came up, and the rest is history. It was incredible. Yep. And then, God, what else? So, yeah, then we went to, after a year with LA Talk Radio, I forget why we were dissatisfied with them. Doesn't really matter, I guess. But we got an offer from one of those guys that had been a host. He started his own thing called New Dissonant Radio. And since he's going to be an interview subject, I tried to get Sam from LA Talk Radio. He seems to be ignoring me. But Johnny Dam I made peace with, and he's going to talk later this week. So any memories about doing the show it was so odd. We were doing a show in a studio in an apartment.
Well,
a little tiny room.
Right. It started off at his apartment. And the reason was economics. I mean, they were going to be, because we'd been there for a year, they were going to be raising our rate at LA Talk Radio. And Johnny Dam was starting up his new place. The way he had described it, it was like, okay, for the first couple of weeks, we're going to be in my in the studio in my apartment, and then I'm going to get another place. And that went on for like 6 months before he finally was able to get the studio for New Dissonant Radio actually up and running. And I remember that we had issues where, we told them we we're going to have guests, and they're going to get there, and they're going to need to be able to sit before they come in. And that was an issue for a while, because, they didn't think they needed to be a waiting room for their studio, which was like, well, but you're running a business out of this that you're having us pay money for. We don't get what your argument was. But I mean, I never really had a beef with Johnny Dam. He was a nice guy. I liked it was inspiring to see him start up something, because I think watching him do it and started to become successful with it, we saw we could do the same thing, and we could do it better.
Yeah.
And that's what led us to starting up Radio Titans.
Yeah. Well, two things that I remember that were the funniest to me about doing it out of his apartment was one of our first guests, at least one, maybe the first female guest there, was comedian Paula Bell. And she's like a real loudmouth, sort of like a female Don Rickles. And she came in there, and she looked genuinely concerned. And then we get into the room with the studio, and she goes, "Oh, thank God, there's an actual studio. There really is a studio here. I thought I was just going to get led into a gang rape." And then the other thing was that we had Tommy Wiseau, the notorious creator of The Room,
That's right.
and Greg Sestero was an acquaintance of mine, his best friend who starred with him in the movie and wrote the book The Disaster Artist that became the big movie later. And I talked Greg into being a guest, but then he surprised us and brought Tommy himself.
He brought
And
in Tommy.
that
I
was mind
couldn't believe
blowing.
that they're actually, yeah, because Jake and I had first seen his movie as a practical joke on April 1st for April Fool's Day on Adult Swim for the Cartoon Network. And instead of, they had advertised they were going to have all this new stuff that was going to be playing. And instead you tuned in and there was The Room. And you're just like, oh my God, I've already seen this. I've seen it once is enough. And I've already interviewed the director / star / writer / whatever else part he played in that. But and then to see it go on to being a like you said, the Disaster Artist with James Franco was tremendously funny.
Yeah.
And then of course then we had Birdemic, the guy who did Birdemic. Remember?
Oh shit! But I could never tell. Did he really take himself seriously, or was he self-aware that this is a joke?
No. I think he believed that he had made one of the best films. That he was completely and utterly satisfied. It was very much like an Ed Wood kind of vibe from him, in the fact that you saw how things panned out, and you're like, well, he was good with that scene, so they just kept going. And I mean, and that was a wild story. I mean, he had that van that had like the twirling birds that were on top of it attacking his car. Do you remember how he was doing everything he could to sell it, and even went up to one of the big film festivals. I think he went up to Sundance and was like driving that vehicle up and down the major thoroughfare.
Oh yeah.
Interested in watching his little film. But yeah, he truly believed he had made a masterpiece.
Well, I'm going to try to find him. That's kind of funny. I wonder if he's still around. But yeah, that was amazing because that movie became kind of a sensation. There was a legendary screening of it at the Cine Family, and it was packed. I remember sitting behind a well-known alternative comic named Paul Scheer. He was in the row in front of me. I wasn't friends with him. In fact, he told me to shut up because I kept making my own wisecracks throughout the movie out loud. And but anyway, it was just a packed house. They staged this wild event, and it was like a Rocky Horror Picture Show for that movie. But what was funny to me was I think we were the first people anywhere to interview that guy and to spotlight that movie, because I received a press release at my job at the paper, and there was just something about the title that jumped out at me. And I was like, Birdemic, shock and awe. What the hell? And it made me laugh. The press release.
Shock and terror, because he made sure to, because we said shock and awe when we did the title, and he was like, oh, he didn't get pissed, but you could tell he was like, no, that's not the name. It's Shock and Terror. Birdemic, Shock and Terror. Every time he referenced the movie, it was the entire title, Shock and Terror.
And I remember he showed up wearing a suit because he said, well, Hitchcock always wore a suit, and I love Hitchcock, so here we are. It was a ripoff of The Birds. It was unbelievable.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there was a second one, man. They made a Birdemic too.
I know. I've heard it was even worse. But I mean, the second one, he must have known that,
Oh, sure.
That probably ruined the vibe of it. The fact that it had to be obvious that it was all a joke to people. But anyways, I should probably cut right now. And let's do more. We'll figure out time to do more later. Probably next week. I'm off the 6th and the 7th. And I'll figure out, because this week I'm kind of slammed. I've got a whole string of people, which is why I'm having to run now. But this has been great, and we'll just add to it later.
All right, dude. Sounds good.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much.
You're welcome, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye. Yep.
All right, bye.